My youngest daughter ran up from the cellar, her face pale, and whispered to her grandpa, "Pack a bag. We need to leave now. Don't call anyone." I sat beside them, speechless. "What's going on?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes trembling, and said, "Please trust me." 20 minutes later, my phone started ringing incessantly. My eldest daughter's name appeared on the screen over and over again. But I didn't dare answer. I was forced to make a choice. And that's when I realized something terrible was about to happen. Whatever awaited us below could tear our family apart forever in a single night. I'm grateful you're here with me today. Before we begin, drop a comment telling me where are you watching from right now. It helps me understand who's listening to this story. And if betrayal has ever touched your family, you're not alone in this room. Quick note, this narrative contains fictionalized elements crafted for reflection and learning. Any similarities to actual people or places happened by chance. But the lessons I'm sharing, those can help you navigate your own life. The machines beeped steadily, a sound I'd grown to hate over 12 hours. My father lay unconscious, tubes running from his arm to the IV pole monitors, tracking every beat of his failing heart. Beside me, my youngest daughter, Emma, just 7, colored quietly in her notebook, trying to stay brave. Every few minutes, she'd look up at him, her small face tight with worry. "Dad, why does Grandpa have all those wires?" "They help the doctors keep him safe, sweetheart." "Is he going to be okay?" I didn't know how to answer that. I stood by the window watching Millbrook's lights flicker below. March in Colorado meant snow still clung to the peaks, but spring was breaking through. My father had always loved this season, saying the lake looked like glass in the mornings, perfect for rowing. Now I wasn't sure he'd ever row again. Dr. Brennan had used words like cardiac episode and significant irregularities. But it was the look in his eyes that stayed with me, the one that said he didn't understand what was happening. Neither did I. Not yet. But staring at my father's unconscious form, I felt something cold settle in my gut. A whisper I'd been ignoring for weeks. 2 months earlier, it started with a phone call in January. I'd been in my study reviewing contracts when my phone buzzed. The name made me freeze. Vesper, my daughter, my oldest. The one I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. She didn't ask how I was or apologize for the silence. She just said, "Dad, I'm coming home. I want to see Grandpa." I should have asked why. But part of me, the part that still remembered her as a little girl, wanted to believe she'd finally grown up. That she'd come back because she missed us. I was a fool. She arrived 2 days later at the Holloway estate, a sprawling Victorian on 2 acres overlooking Lake Thornton. 4 generations of our family had lived here. My father built his shipping business from nothing, and this house was his monument to hard work and integrity. Vesper stood on the porch, older and thinner than I remembered, but smiling. She hugged me, and for a moment it felt real. Emma watched from the doorway, quiet and uncertain. She'd been 3 the last time she'd seen her older sister. Now she barely remembered her. "Emma, come say hi to Vesper." Emma stepped forward, slowly, shy. "Hi." Vesper crouched down, smiling. "Look at you, you're so big now." But Emma hadn't smiled back. She just nodded and retreated to my side. That night at dinner, my father was overjoyed. He hadn't seen Vesper since she'd left town after borrowing money she never repaid. But he didn't bring that up. He just smiled, asked questions, told her how much he'd missed her. Vesper played her part beautifully. She laughed at his jokes, complimented the meal, asked about his health. Then, as we cleared plates, she said it, and, "Grandpa, you look tired. Have you thought about updating your will just in case?" The room went quiet. My father chuckled, waving her off. "I'm not going anywhere yet, sweetheart. But yes, everything's in order. Split right down the middle between your father and you. 50-50. Vesper nodded. 12 million, right? That's what the estate's worth. My jaw tightened. My father didn't notice. He was too busy beaming at her, but I noticed. I noticed the calculation in her eyes. The way she leaned forward too eagerly. Something in her smile didn't reach her eyes. Later that night, Emma came into my room. "Dad, why did Vesper ask about money?" "She's just making sure Grandpa's taking care of Honey." Emma frowned. She looked at Grandpa funny. "What do you mean?" "I don't know, just funny." I'd brushed it off, told her not to worry. But her words stuck with me. I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe Vesper genuinely wanted to reconnect. But that feeling didn't go away. Over the next weeks, Vesper became a fixture at the estate. She visited daily, bringing my father tea, sitting with him in the sunroom, taking walks around the property. He loved it. He told me how grateful he was that she'd come home. Then he started getting sick, subtle at first. Fatigue, dizziness, a racing heartbeat that came and went. I insisted he see Dr. Brennan, our family physician, for 20 years. Brennan ran tests and shrugged. "Stress, Adrian. He's 82. His body's slowing down." But my father had always been strong. He rode every morning, worked in his wood shop every afternoon. He didn't slow down until Vesper came back. One evening, Vesper caught me in the foyer. "Dad, I know you're worried about Grandpa. Let me help. I can stay here, keep an eye on him. Make sure he takes his meds." I should have said no. I should have seen it then. But I wanted to believe my daughter had come home, that she cared. So I said yes, and I watched her smile, feeling that same cold whisper in my gut. 3 weeks later, I got the call. My father had collapsed. Paramedics were on the way. By the time I reached Millbrook General, he was stable but unconscious. Dr. Brennan met me in the hallway, his face tight. "Adrian, we need to talk, privately." We stepped into a consultation room. Brennan closed the door. "Your father's symptoms don't match his medication history." I stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means his heart shouldn't be reacting this way. Not with the prescriptions he's on. Either something's interfering with his meds or..." He trailed off, but I heard the unspoken words. "Or someone's giving him something else." I walked back to my father's room in a daze. Vesper was already there, sitting beside his bed, holding his hand. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. She looked up when I entered. "Dad, is he going to be okay?" Emma stood by the door, watching her older sister with those quiet, observant eyes. I wanted to believe the concern in Vesper's voice. The tears. But all I could think about was how she'd asked about the will. How my father's health had nosedived the moment she returned. How Emma had said she looked at Grandpa funny. I stood there watching Vesper stroke my father's hand, and the cold whisper in my gut turned into a scream. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. I left the hospital as dawn broke over the Rockies, my mind racing. Emma slept in the back seat, exhausted. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Because somewhere between the beeping machines and Vesper's false tears, I'd made a decision. I was going to find out what was happening to my father. And the next morning I found something that changed everything. Sleep never came. I'd driven home from Millbrook General as the first light touched the mountains, but instead of collapsing into bed, I sat in my study staring at the wall. My father's face kept flashing through my mind. The tubes, the monitors, Dr. Brennan's warning, something's interfering with his meds. By the time the sun cleared the peaks and painted the lake gold, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for answers. I was going to find them myself. My father's room sat at the east end of the house, overlooking the water. I hadn't been in here since the ambulance took him away, and stepping inside felt like trespassing. The bed was still unmade. His reading glasses sat on the nightstand beside a worn copy of Lonesome Dove. The scent of his cologne lingered faintly in the air. I moved to the bathroom. The medicine cabinet hung above the sink, white paint chipped at the corners. I opened it slowly. Rows of amber bottles lined the shelves. Blood pressure medication, cholesterol pills, baby aspirin. And there on the second shelf, the one that mattered most. Metoprolol, for his heart. I picked up the bottle, turned it over. The label looked right. Prescription filled 6 weeks ago at Millbrook Pharmacy. Dr. Brennan's name printed neatly at the bottom, but something felt off. I unscrewed the cap and poured a few pills into my palm. Small white tablets, round and smooth. They looked like they always did, except I squinted, holding them up to the light. The color wasn't quite uniform. Some were bright white. Others had a faint yellowish tint, almost imperceptible unless you were looking for it. My heart started pounding. I grabbed my phone and called Dr. Brennan. He answered on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Adrian, it's 7 in the morning. I need to see you. Today. Now." There was a pause, then quieter. "What did you find?" "I'm not sure yet, but I need you to test something." An hour later, I was sitting in Brennan's office in Denver. He met me at the door, gestured me into his private office, and closed the door. I handed him the bottle. He studied the label first, then poured the pills onto his desk. He didn't say anything, but I saw his jaw tighten. He pulled a small testing kit from his drawer, crushed one of the pills, added a few drops of solution, and watched the color change. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Finally, Brennan looked up. His face was grim. "This isn't metoprolol." I felt the floor shift under me. "What is it?" "Pseudoephedrine. It's a decongestant, a stimulant." I stared at him. "A stimulant. For someone with your father's heart condition, this could trigger arrhythmia, hypertension, even a heart attack." He set the pill fragments down carefully. "Someone switched his medication, Adrian. Deliberately." The word hung in the air between us. Deliberately. Not an accident. Not a pharmacy error. Deliberately. My hands started shaking. "Who would do that?" Brennan's voice was gentle, but his eyes were steel. "Who has access to his medication?" I didn't want to answer, because saying it would make it real. 3 people, I said finally. "Me, Lily, our housekeeper. She's been with us 20 years. My voice cracked. "And Vesper." Brennan nodded slowly. "Have you noticed anything unusual?" I thought about the way Vesper had appraised the house, the way she'd asked about the will, the way my father's health had nosedived the moment she started visiting. I wanted to be wrong, but the pills on Brennan's desk didn't lie. "What do I do?" I asked. "Shouldn't you need more evidence?" Brennan said. "This is serious. If someone is intentionally harming your father, you need to build a case. Solid. Undeniable. How? Start with her financials. People don't do this without a reason. Usually it's money." I thought about the $12 million, the estate, the will split 50-50, and I thought about Vesper sitting beside my father's hospital bed, playing the devoted granddaughter. I stood up, pocketing the pill bottle. "I need to make a call." Brennan handed me his phone. I dialed Harlan Pierce, the attorney who'd handled our family's legal work for 30 years. "My Harlan, it's Adrian. I need you to look into something for me." "Sure. What's up?" "Financial records, my daughter. Debts accounts, anything unusual." There was a pause. "Adrian, what's going on?" "I can't explain right now, just please, I need this." "Okay, I'll see what I can find." I hung up and handed the phone back to Brennan. "I'm sorry, Adrian," he said quietly. "Don't be. Not yet." I turned toward the door. "Marcus, can you keep the pills for evidence?" "Already done." The drive back to Millbrook felt longer. I kept replaying Brennan's words. Deliberately, someone switched his medication. I wanted to believe there was some other explanation. But the pills told a different story. And deep down, I knew the truth. My daughter was trying to harm my father. I just didn't know why yet. By the time I pulled into the estate's long driveway, the sun was setting behind the Rockies. The house looked peaceful, framed by pines and the shimmering lake beyond. But as I parked and stepped out, I heard voices, laughter coming from inside. I walked up the porch steps, pushed open the front door, and froze. Vesper stood in the foyer. Her arm looped through the arm of a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, mid-30s, with an easy smile and expensive clothes. She saw me and grinned. "Dad, You're home. I want you to meet someone." The man extended his hand. "Mr. Holloway, Malcolm Reed, it's a pleasure." I shook his hand mechanically, my mind racing. Who was this? Where had he come from? Vesper beamed. "Malcolm's been helping me get back on my feet. He's amazing, Dad. I can't wait for you to get to know him." I looked at her, at the brightness in her eyes, at the way she clutched Malcolm's arm like a lifeline, and suddenly everything made sense. She wasn't doing this alone. I sat in my study pretending to read the same page of a legal brief I'd already read 5 times. The words blurred together, meaningless. My mind was elsewhere, racing through scenarios, trying to piece together what I'd just discovered. Vesper wasn't working alone. The man standing in my foyer, shaking my hand with that practiced smile, was part of this. I didn't know how yet, but every instinct I'd honed over 30 years of corporate law told me Malcolm Reed was dangerous. The clock on the mantel ticked past 7. Outside, the last traces of daylight faded behind the mountains. I heard voices drifting from the front of the house. Laughter, Vesper's bright and performative, his smooth as expensive whiskey. Lily appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She'd been with our family since Vesper was a teenager, and right now her weathered face showed concern. "Mr. Holloway, dinner's ready. Should I set 3 places?" "Yes, Lily, thank you." She hesitated. "That man with Miss Vesper. You know him?" Not yet," I said, "but I will." The dining room smelled like rosemary and garlic. Lily had prepared roasted chicken, one of my father's favorites, though the chair at the head of the table sat empty. It felt wrong eating without him. Malcolm sat across from me, Vesper at his side. He'd made himself comfortable, slouching slightly, one arm draped casually over the back of Vesper's seat. Confident. Too confident for a man meeting his girlfriend's father for the first time. "This is incredible, Mr. Holloway," Malcolm said. "Vesper told me about this place, but seeing it in person, stunning. Must be worth a fortune." The words hung there naked and obvious. Vesper shot him a look, but Malcolm just smiled. "I mean, real estate out here, lakefront property, the history. You're sitting on a gold mine." I took a sip of water. "We've never thought of it that way. It's home." "Of course." Malcolm leaned forward. "Vesper mentioned your father's not doing well. Heart trouble, right?" "Yes." "I worked in pharmaceutical sales for years. If you ever want me to take a look at his prescriptions, make sure everything's optimized, I'd be happy to help. Sometimes doctors prescribe combinations that don't play well together." There it was. The offer delivered with a concerned smile. But all I heard was a man with knowledge of medications offering to get his hands on my father's pills. My grip tightened on my fork. "That's thoughtful, Malcolm. But Dr. Brennan has been our physician for 20 years. I trust him." "Oh, absolutely. Just offering." He sat back unruffled. "So, Vesper tells me you're retired from corporate law. Ever deal with complicated inheritance cases?" I looked at Vesper. She was staring at her plate, pushing food around with her fork, her jaw tight. She looked nervous, or guilty. "A few," I said carefully. "Fascinating stuff. The legal side of passing wealth down. Trusts, wills, tax implications. I bet your father's estate is pretty complex." "Malcolm," Vesper said quietly, her voice strained. "Maybe we shouldn't. I'm just making conversation, babe." He squeezed her shoulder and she flinched. Barely noticeable, but I saw it. The rest of the meal dragged on with painful small talk. Malcolm dominated the conversation, asking questions that felt like reconnaissance. How long had my father been widowed? Did he have other assets? Had he updated his will recently? I answered in vague terms, giving nothing away, and watched. Watched the way Malcolm's charm never reached his eyes. Watched the way Vesper kept glancing at him, waiting for approval. Watched the way he touched her, possessive, controlling. This wasn't love. This was something transactional. When Lily cleared the plates, Vesper excused herself to help in the kitchen. Malcolm stayed at the table, swirling his wine. You've got a great daughter, Mr. Holloway. I met his gaze. I know. She's been through a rough patch, financial trouble, but she's turning it around. He smiled. We're actually talking about getting married, settling down here in Millbrook, being closer to family during this time with your father's health and all. It just makes sense. Closer to the money, I thought. Closer to the estate. Closer to the will. I excused myself, claiming I needed to check on something upstairs. Malcolm waved me off, still lounging in my dining room like he owned the place. I climbed the stairs to the second floor. The hallway window overlooked the side yard. I stood in the shadows, waiting. 10 minutes later, the back door opened. Vesper and Malcolm stepped outside, their breath misting in the cold air. They stood close, but their body language was all wrong. Tense. Urgent. Vesper reached into her jacket and pulled out an envelope. White standard size, but thick. She handed it to Malcolm. He opened it, thumbed through the contents. Even from this distance, I could see the edges of bills. Cash. Malcolm counted quickly, then folded the envelope and slipped it into his coat pocket. He said something I couldn't hear. Vesper nodded, wrapping her arms around herself. I pulled out my phone, zoomed in, and took 3 photos. The flash was off. They didn't notice. Malcolm leaned in, kissed Vesper's forehead, and walked toward his car. She stood there alone for a moment, looking small, fragile, almost like the daughter I used to know. But then she straightened, wiped her face, and went back inside. The mask slipped back into place. I stayed at the window, staring at the photos on my phone. Evidence. Not enough for police, but enough to confirm what I knew. This man wasn't here because he loved my daughter. He was here because he smelled money. I called Harlan Pierce. He answered on the first ring. Adrian twice in 2 days. What's going on? I need you to look into someone else. Malcolm Reed. Everything. Background, employment history, financials. Criminal record, if he has one. Who is he? My daughter's boyfriend, and I think he's helping her. Harlan was quiet. Helping her do what? I closed my eyes. I'll explain when I have proof. Just find out who this guy is. I'll get on it first thing tomorrow. I hung up and stared out at the dark yard. My father was coming home tomorrow. Dr. Brennan had called to say he was stable enough to discharge, which meant I had less than 12 hours to figure out how to protect him while living under the same roof as the people trying to end his life. I couldn't confront them. Not yet. I needed more than pills and envelopes and bad feelings. I needed a plan. I looked down at the photos on my phone one more time. Vesper handing over cash. Malcolm pocketing it like payment. The way she looked at him wasn't love. It was desperation. Fear, maybe. Or greed. And that scared me more than anything. Because desperate people do dangerous things. I pulled into the hospital parking lot just after 8. The morning air sharp and cold. My father was already dressed and sitting in a wheelchair by the discharge desk, looking smaller than I remembered. 5 days in a hospital bed had aged him. His skin had a gray tinge and his hands trembled slightly. But when he saw me, he smiled. That same smile that had greeted me every morning of my childhood. Ready to get out of here, son? I helped him into the car. The drive back to Millbrook took 40 minutes. My father dozed most of the way, his head resting against the window. I didn't tell him what I'd found. Not yet. He didn't need that burden while recovering. When we pulled up to the estate, Vesper's car was already in the driveway. She appeared on the porch as I helped my father out, her face a picture of concern. Grandpa, oh, thank God you're home. She rushed down and wrapped her arms around him, careful, gentle. Oswald patted her back, his eyes welling up. Malcolm appeared behind her, hands in his pockets, that easy smile plastered across his face. Good to see you up and about, Mr. Holloway. We were worried. I caught Vesper's eye over my father's shoulder. She held my gaze for half a second, then looked away. Worried, right. By noon, Vesper and Malcolm announced they were heading into town for groceries. I watched from the study window as they drove off, waiting until their car disappeared. Then I made the call. I'd worked with TJ Morrison back in my law days handling security for corporate clients. He ran a discreet private firm out of Denver. He answered on the second ring. Adrian Holloway, been a while. I need a favor, TJ, today. Now, if you can manage it. What kind of favor? 6 cameras. Hidden. Feeds to a secured laptop. Can you do it? There was a pause. You in some kind of trouble? The kind I can't talk about yet. Give me 2 hours. He showed up 90 minutes later with an unmarked van and a young tech named Sam. They worked fast, professional, asking no questions. Oswald's bedroom. Small camera tucked into the smoke detector. The bathroom. Another in the air vent above the medicine cabinet. The kitchen, mounted inside the microwave vent hood. The wine cellar entrance, disguised as a coat hook. The front gate, installed in the light fixture. The boathouse, positioned under the eaves. Sam ran the feeds through an encrypted router, synced everything to a laptop. He showed me how to access the live streams, how to download clips. Motion-activated recording, he explained. You've got about 2 weeks of storage before it loops over. That should be enough. By the time Vesper and Malcolm returned, TJ and Sam were gone. The cameras were invisible. I spent the rest of the afternoon watching the feeds. Oswald napping, Lily cleaning, Vesper unpacking groceries. Everything looked normal. But I knew better. That evening, my phone rang. Dr. Brennan, Adrian, I've been going over your father's medical records. The medication tampering didn't happen overnight. Based on his symptoms and the timeline, someone's been switching those pills for at least 6 weeks. 6 weeks. That lined up exactly with when Vesper came back. Adrian, whoever did this, was patient, methodical. They knew what they were doing. Meaning they'll try again. Maybe not the same way, but they will try again. His voice dropped. Keep your father safe. Don't let anyone near his medications. I will. After I hung up, I sat in the dark staring at the laptop screen. 6 feeds, 6 angles. My home under surveillance. Because I couldn't trust the people living in it. I thought about calling the police. But what would I tell them? I had 1 bottle of fake medication and some security footage. It wasn't enough. Not for an arrest. I needed more. The next morning, I woke early and pulled up the overnight footage. Most of it was nothing. Empty hallways, dark rooms. Then I saw the timestamp 11:47 p.m. Oswald's bedroom. The camera had a clear view of the bed and door. The door opened. Vesper stepped inside, moving quietly barefoot. She wore pajamas, her hair loose. She looked young, innocent. She crossed the room, stopped at the foot of my father's bed, and stood there. Watching, my father's chest rose and fell under the blankets. He didn't wake. Vesper leaned closer, tilting her head like she was listening, checking his breathing, and then she just stood there. 30 seconds. Maybe more. Her face was blank, cold, not sad, not worried, just waiting. Finally, she turned and left, closing the door softly. I watched the clip 3 times, feeling something crack inside my chest. The daughter I'd raised was gone. In her place was someone who could stand over an old man's bed and wait for him to stop breathing. There was a knock on the study door. I closed the laptop quickly. Lily stepped inside, wringing her hands. Mr. Holloway, I'm sorry to bother you. It's fine, Lily. What's wrong? She glanced over her shoulder, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. Miss Vesper asked me something yesterday about Mr. Oswald's will. My stomach dropped. What did she ask? If he'd updated it recently, if he'd made any changes. Lily's eyes were red. I've worked for this family 20 years. I've never been afraid here. But now... I know, I said quietly. She nodded. If you need me to testify to tell someone what I've seen, I will. Thank you, Lily. After she left, I sat alone, the weight of everything pressing down. The cameras were running. Dr. Brennan was on alert. Harlan was digging into Malcolm's background, but none of it felt like enough. I opened the laptop again, pulled up the live feed from Oswald's room. He was awake now, sitting up in bed, reading the newspaper. He looked peaceful, safe, but he wasn't, and I was running out of time. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, they made their move. I woke before dawn with the kind of dread that sits heavy in your chest and won't let go. The house was silent. The lake outside my window still black under the fading stars. I'd been watching the surveillance feeds until past midnight, seeing nothing unusual. But my gut told me something was wrong. I got dressed and went downstairs, moving quietly through the dark hallway. Through the window, I could see the first pale light touching the eastern ridge of the mountains. March in Colorado was unpredictable. I checked the outdoor thermometer mounted by the back door. 42 degrees. The lake would be colder. Much colder. Cold enough to stop a man's heart if he stayed in too long. My father had been rowing every morning for 30 years. Doctor's orders after his first heart scare back in the 90s. 20 minutes on the water-steady rhythm, good for circulation. I glanced at the clock. 6:45. He'd be up any minute. I grabbed my jacket and headed outside, cutting across the lawn toward the dock. The boathouse sat at the water's edge, a small wooden structure my grandfather had built decades ago. I reached the dock just as the sun broke over the ridge, spilling gold across the water. Lake Thornton stretched out before me, glass smooth and impossibly still. Beautiful, deadly if you weren't careful. I heard footsteps behind me and turned. My father was coming down the path, moving slowly, a mug of coffee in his hand. He wore his old flannel jacket and a wool cap. When he saw me, he smiled. "You're up early, son. Couldn't sleep." Something like that. I tried to keep my voice casual. "Thought I'd join you this morning, if that's all right." "Of course, always room in the boat." "Dad, wait." I stepped in front of him. "Let me check the boat first. We haven't used it all winter. Want to make sure it's still sound." He raised an eyebrow. "It's fine, Adrian. I checked it last week." "Humor me." He shrugged. "All right, you always were the careful one." I pulled open the boathouse door. The smell of damp wood and old canvas hit me. The rowboat sat on its rack. I flipped it over and lowered it onto the dolly. Then I crouched down to inspect it. The hull looked fine. No cracks, no visible damage. I ran my hand along the underside, checking the seams, until I reached the drain plug. It was there, threaded into the hole at the stern, but something was wrong. I touched it, and it shifted under my fingers. Loose. Deliberately loosened just enough that water would seep in slowly once the boat was in the water. Not a flood. A gradual leak. By the time you noticed, you'd be too far from shore. My heart started pounding. I moved to the oarlocks, the metal fittings that held the oars in place. I gripped one and applied pressure. It snapped clean off in my hand. The metal had been filed down. Weakened. It looked intact, but the moment you put weight on it, it would break. And without oars, you couldn't steer. Couldn't get back. I dropped the broken oarlock and spun around. The life vests usually hung on hooks by the door. 4 of them, bright orange, easy to spot. They were gone. I found them 30 seconds later, shoved into a storage bin in the corner, buried under old tarps and fishing nets. Someone had moved them. Hidden them. My hands started shaking. This wasn't an accident. This was a trap. If my father had gotten into that boat this morning, the drain plug would have let water in slowly. The oarlocks would have snapped mid-stroke. He would have been stranded in the middle of the lake, the boat taking on water, no way to row back, no life vest. In 45-degree water, hypothermia sets in within minutes. He wouldn't have made it to shore. They would have found him floating face down by noon. And everyone would have called it a tragic accident. I stumbled out of the boathouse, my breath coming fast. My father was standing on the dock, sipping his coffee, watching the sunrise. He turned when he heard me. "Adrian, what's wrong?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "How do you tell your father that someone just tried to drown him?" "The boat." I finally managed. It's not safe. The plug's loose, the oar locks are broken. We can't use it. He frowned. That's strange. I checked it last week. Well, someone's been messing with it since then. Who would do that? I looked at him, this man who trusted everyone because he believed people were fundamentally good. I don't know, Dad, but we're not taking any chances. No rowing today. He studied my face and I saw something shift in his eyes. Understanding. Or maybe just the beginning of it. All right, son, if you say so. I walked him back to the house, feeling the fragility of him. How easy it would be to lose him. After I got him settled inside with Lily, I went back to the dock alone. I pulled out my phone and photographed everything. The drain plug, the broken oar lock, the life vests hidden in the storage bin. Evidence. I was crouched by the boat when I felt eyes on me. I looked up at the house. Second floor. The guest room window. Vesper stood there, arms crossed, watching. Our eyes met across the distance. She knew. She knew I'd found the boat. Knew I'd stopped my father. Knew her plan had failed. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she stepped back from the window and disappeared. I stood there on the dock, phone in my hand, feeling the weight of it all settle over me. This was real. My daughter was trying to end my father's life, and she knew I was onto her. They'd tried to make it look like an accident. Drowning. Hypothermia. An old man who misjudged the season and paid the price. Clean. Untraceable. Almost perfect. Except I'd caught them. I saved my father that morning. Pulled him back from the edge without him even knowing how close he'd come. But as I walked back toward the house, the sun climbing higher over the mountains, I knew one thing for certain. This wouldn't be the last time. The call came while I was making coffee, hands still shaking from the previous morning. I'd barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father climbing into that sabotaged boat. I answered on the second ring. Harlan, Adrian, you need to come to my office now. How bad is it? Bad enough that I don't want to discuss it over the phone. How soon can you get here? I looked at the clock. 7:30. I'm on my way. The drive through the mountains gave me too much time to think. I kept replaying the past 2 weeks. Vesper's sudden return. My father's declining health. The switched medication. The sabotaged boat. And Malcolm. Smooth, charming Malcolm who asked too many questions and knew too much about pharmaceuticals. Whatever Harlan had found, I knew it was going to be worse than I'd imagined. His office sat on the 16th floor of a glass tower in downtown Denver. Harlan was waiting behind his desk, a thick folder spread open in front of him. He didn't stand when I entered, just gestured to the chair. Sit down, Adrian. He slid the folder toward me. Malcolm Reed, age 36, worked pharmaceutical sales until 2 years ago when he was fired. Fired for what? Falsifying sales records, forging doctor signatures. The company chose not to press charges, but he's blacklisted. Harlan flipped to the next page. But here's where it gets interesting. Malcolm Reed owes $1.8 million. The number hung in the air between us. How? Gambling, mostly poker. He's been borrowing from underground sources to cover losses. This man, Vincent Carver, runs loan operations out of 5 Points. Very dangerous. And Malcolm owes him $1.8 million. Correct. Harlan pulled out another set of documents. Now let's talk about your daughter. I closed my eyes. How much? $2.4 million. The air left my lungs. Casino debts, private poker games, high-stakes tables. She's been on a losing streak for at least 4 years. He slid a bank statement across the desk. And she owes the same man, Vincent Carver. I stared at the numbers. $4.2 million total. When's the deadline? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. They've got 15 days left, Adrian, maybe less. I thought about my father's estate. $12 million. Split 50-50 between Vesper and me. 6 million each. 6 million wasn't enough to cover 4.2 million in debts, but 12 million was. They're planning to take him out, I said slowly. Both of us. Harlan nodded. If your father dies, the estate gets split. 6 million each. If you also die with your current will, leaving everything to Vesper, she'd get the full 12 million. Enough to pay off Carver with money left over. Jesus. Adrian, is your will updated? I wrote it 10 years ago. Everything goes to Vesper. Harlan leaned forward. Change it. Today. Right now. 30 minutes later, I was signing a new will. The estate would be divided between my father's charitable foundation and a community land trust. Vesper would receive $100,000. Signed, notarized, and filed. Harlan said, You're protected. Thank you. Adrian. He caught my arm. You need to involve the police. Not yet. I need undeniable proof. I need them to confess, or get caught in the act. Harlan looked at me for a long moment. Be careful. These people are cornered, and cornered animals do terrible things. The drive back took longer. By the time I reached the mountains, the sun was setting. My phone buzzed. Vesper. Dad, where are you? Malcolm and I made dinner. We're waiting for you. I kept my voice neutral. I'll be home soon, sweetheart. After I hung up, I pulled over and opened the surveillance app. The feeds loaded slowly. Living room empty. Kitchen empty. Oswald's bedroom, my father napping. My study, 2 figures moving around my desk. I tapped the feed, enlarging it. Vesper and Malcolm. She was pulling open drawers, rifling through papers. He was checking the filing cabinet. I turned up the volume. The will has to be here somewhere. Vesper said, her voice tight with frustration. Maybe he keeps it at his lawyer's office. No, he's old school. He'd want a copy here. She slammed a drawer shut. We need to know what it says. Malcolm straightened. Once the old man's gone, we deal with Adrian next. Then it's all yours. 12 million. Clean. So what if he suspects something? He doesn't. He's too busy playing the protective son. Malcolm lowered his voice. 2 more weeks. That's all we need. Then we stick to the plan. The wine cellar. Final attempt. Day 13. I replayed the audio 3 times, my hands clenched around the steering wheel. They were planning something bigger. Something final. Day 13. I had 5 days. By the time I pulled into the estate's driveway, it was full dark. I walked inside, and Vesper was waiting in the foyer. She threw her arms around me. Dad, you're home. I was getting worried. For just a moment, she felt small in my arms, like the little girl who used to run to me when she scraped her knee. And for just a moment, I wanted to believe that girl was still in there somewhere. But then she pulled back, smiling up at me, and I saw the calculation in her eyes, the mask slipping back into place. Come on, she said, linking her arm through mine. Dinner's getting cold. I followed her into the dining room, and I thought about the audio recording on my phone, the updated will in Harlan's office, the wine cellar they'd mentioned. Day 13. I had 5 days. Dinner was waiting when I walked through the door. The smell of roasted vegetables and garlic filled the house, warm and inviting. Vesper appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel, smiling like nothing in the world was wrong. And Dad, perfect timing. We just finished cooking. Malcolm emerged from the kitchen behind her, holding a bottle of wine. Hope you're hungry, Adrian. Vesper went all out tonight. I forced a smile, shrugging off my coat. Smells great. My father was in the living room, sitting in his favorite chair by the fireplace. He had a photo album open on his lap, the kind with the plastic sleeves yellowed from age. He looked up when I entered. Adrian, come look at this. Found some old pictures I'd forgotten about. I crossed the room and sat on the arm of his chair. The photos were from decades ago. My father younger, stronger. My mother beside him laughing. And there on the next page, a little girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile. Vesper. Maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing on the dock with a fishing pole twice her size. My father tapped the photo with his finger. Remember this, her first fishing trip. She was so determined to catch something bigger than me. I stared at the picture, at the brightness in her eyes, the pure, uncomplicated joy. Yeah, I said quietly, I remember. And suddenly I was back there, 25 years ago, back when the world made sense. It was summer, late July. Vesper had turned 8 that week, and all she wanted for her birthday was to learn how to row. So I took her down to the dock early one morning. The rowboat bobbed gently in the water, and Vesper stood beside it in her pink life vest, practically vibrating with excitement. Can we go now, Daddy? Can we? See, hold on, kiddo. Let me show you how to get in without tipping us over. I helped her step into the boat, steadying it with one hand. She sat in the middle seat, gripping the sides, her eyes wide. Okay. Now rowing's all about rhythm, smooth strokes. You don't fight the water, you work with it. I let her hold the oars, my hands over hers, guiding her through the motion. Pull back, lift forward, dip. She laughed every time water splashed up, soaking her shirt. I'm doing it, Daddy, I'm really doing it. You sure are, sweetheart. We rowed out to the center of the lake. Vesper let go of the oars and leaned back, staring up at the sky. Daddy! Yeah. When I grow up, I want to be just like Grandpa, strong and kind, like he is. Something in my chest tightened. You can be anything you want, Vesper. I want to make you proud. You already do, baby, every single day. When we got back to the dock, my father was waiting. He helped Vesper out of the boat, and she immediately started chattering about everything she'd learned. Oswald crouched down to her level. Vesper, I want to tell you something important. Can you listen? She nodded, suddenly serious. Money doesn't make you rich. Not really. Integrity does. Being honest even when it's hard. Keeping your promises. Treating people right. He gestured toward the estate behind them. This house, this land, all of it, it doesn't mean anything if we don't have character. Do you understand? I think so. Well, our family name means something in this town. We built it on honesty, on doing the right thing even when no one's watching. He tapped her chest gently. That's what matters. What's in here? Vesper looked up at him, her eyes shining. I promise, Grandpa. I'll never let you down. He pulled her into a hug, and over her shoulder, his eyes met mine. There was something in his expression I didn't understand then. A kind of sadness. Dad. Vesper's voice yanked me back to the present. I blinked, disoriented, the photo album still open on my father's lap. She was standing in the doorway, arms crossed. You okay? You look sad. I looked at her. Really looked at her. 33 years old. Hair darker now, face sharper. The softness of childhood long gone. And I thought, what happened to you? When did the little girl who promised integrity turn into the woman standing over her grandfather's bed, waiting for him to die? I'm fine, I said, closing the album. Just tired. The four of us sat around the dining table. Oswald at the head like always. Vesper to his right, playing the devoted granddaughter. Malcolm across from her pouring wine and making small talk. Me at the far end watching it all unfold. Oswald told stories from when he was young. Vesper laughed in all the right places, touched his hand affectionately. Malcolm complimented the food, asked about the estate's history, mentioned how much he was looking forward to being part of the family. And I sat there watching two people who wanted us dead pretend to love us. How do you mourn someone who's still alive? How do you grieve the loss of a daughter who's sitting 3 feet away, smiling at you? I looked at Vesper, and for just a second, I saw that 8-year-old girl in the rowboat. The one who wanted to be strong and kind like her grandpa. The one who promised she'd never let him down. And I wanted to reach across the table and ask her why. But I didn't, because I knew the answer wouldn't change anything. After dinner, Vesper hugged me goodnight. Malcolm shook my hand. My father went to bed early, exhausted, and I stood alone in the study, staring at the surveillance feeds on my laptop, replaying the audio from earlier. Wine cellar, final attempt. Day 13. 4 days from now. I closed the laptop and stared out the window at the dark lake. Tomorrow morning I'd keep looking, keep gathering evidence, keep trying to stay one step ahead. Because if I stopped even for a moment, I'd lose everything. And the little girl who used to promise integrity would win. Not because she was smarter, but because I'd taught her to be strong. The laptop sat open on my desk, 6 camera feeds tiled across the screen. I'd been watching since dawn, waiting for something. Anything. My father's morning routine never changed. Breakfast at 8, a walk around the property at 8:30, tea in the sunroom at 9:30 where he'd read the paper and watched the birds. It was 9:15 when I saw Vesper move into the kitchen. I'd been nursing cold coffee eyes burning from lack of sleep. The footage from the night before played on a loop in my mind. The wine cellar. Day 13. 2 days from now, but they weren't waiting. On the screen, Vesper moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. She filled the kettle, set it on the stove, pulled down my father's favorite mug, the blue ceramic one with the chipped handle. She looked normal, casual, like a granddaughter making tea for someone she loved. Then she paused, glanced toward the doorway, checked over her shoulder. The kitchen was empty. Lily had gone into town. Malcolm was still asleep. My father was in the sunroom waiting. Vesper reached into her purse. My pulse spiked. She pulled out a small amber bottle, prescription size. She unscrewed the cap, tilted it into her palm. 2 white pills dropped out. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart hammering. She set the pills on the counter, picked up a spoon, and crushed them methodically, grinding them into powder. Then she scraped the powder into the mug and stirred, round and round, dissolving into the tea. She rinsed the spoon, slipped the pill bottle back into her purse, poured the tea, and smiled. I was out of my chair before I realized I'd moved. I took the stairs 2 at a time. She was walking toward the sunroom. 30 seconds, maybe less. I had to get there first. I burst through the sunroom door just as Vesper set the tray down beside my father's chair. He looked up surprised. "Adrian, you're up early." Vesper turned the teacup in her hand. For half a second, her smile faltered. Then it snapped back into place. "Morning, Dad. I was just bringing Grandpa his tea." I crossed the room, forcing my breathing to slow. "Actually, Dad, wait. Let me taste it first. I've been craving tea all morning." My father frowned. "You don't even like tea. I'm trying new things." I reached for the cup in Vesper's hand. She pulled it back slightly, her grip tightening. Dad, this is Grandpa's special blend. You hate Earl Grey. Let me make you something else." "No." I held out my hand. "I want that one." We locked eyes. Hers were wide pupils dilated. I saw the calculation behind them, the panic barely concealed. She couldn't refuse without raising suspicion. Slowly she handed me the cup. "Suit yourself." I brought it to my lips and took a small sip. Bitter, floral, and something else. A chalky aftertaste that didn't belong. I walked to the window where a potted fern sat on the sill, and I poured the rest of the tea into the soil. "You know what, too bitter? Not my thing after all." I set the empty cup on the tray and turned to Vesper. "Why don't you make a fresh pot, sweetheart? I'll keep Dad company." Her jaw tightened, just for a moment. Then she smiled again. "Of course, be right back." She left, taking the tray with her. My father set down his newspaper. "What was that about?" "Nothing, just felt like tea." He studied me, his eyes sharp. "You're acting strange, son." "I'm fine, Dad, promise." I wasn't fine. My hands were shaking, but I kept my face calm. A few minutes later, Vesper returned with a fresh cup. This time I followed her into the kitchen, leaning against the counter while she worked. She couldn't add anything else. Not with me standing 3 feet away. When the tea was ready, she carried it to the sunroom. My father took a sip and nodded approvingly. "Perfect. Thank you, sweetheart." "You're welcome, Grandpa." She kissed the top of his head. "I'm going to lie down for a bit. I have a headache." She glanced at me on her way out. Her expression was unreadable. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close. Then I went back to the sunroom, and retrieved the potted fern. Dad, I'm borrowing this. Why, science project. Back in my study, I carefully scooped soil and tea residue into a plastic bag. Then I called Dr. Brennan. He answered on the first ring. Adrian. What now? I need you to test something. Again. What is it this time? Tea. She put something in my father's tea. Did he drink it? No, I intercepted it. Bring it to my office. I'll run it through the lab. By late afternoon, I had my answer. I sat across from Brennan in his office, the test results spread on the desk between us. Diphenhydramine, Brennan said. Common name Benadryl. In high doses, it acts as a sedative. How much was in the tea? Enough to knock out a grown man. Combined with your father's heart medication, it would cause severe drowsiness, disorientation, and a dangerous drop in blood pressure. What would happen if he drank it? Best case, he'd pass out. Worst case, he'd try to stand, get dizzy, and fall. At his age, a fall like that could be catastrophic. Head injury, broken hip, internal bleeding. And it would look like an accident. Brennan nodded grimly. Exactly. Look, this is the third time, Marcus. Medication. The boat. Now this. Adrian, you need to call the police, now. It's not enough. I need them to confess. I need them caught in the act with no way out. I stood pacing. They mentioned the wine cellar. Day 13. That's 2 days from now. I'm going to set a trap. Adrian, that's dangerous. I know, but I need them to commit. Fully. No room for doubt. He looked at me for a long time. You're playing a very dangerous game. I know. 2 days. That's all I had. Day 13 was coming. And one way or another, this would end. Emma burst into the living room, her face pale. Hattie, Grandpa, there's something really weird in the wine cellar. I looked up from my laptop. Oswald set down his newspaper. What do you mean, sweetheart? I asked. A big metal tank. With tubes and a clock, and it's counting down, my father chuckled. Honey, that's probably just the old heating system, but my blood had gone cold. I thought about the past 2 weeks. Vesper disappearing downstairs, always alone, always locking the door. Malcolm showing up with bags, their whispered conversations. Emma, show me! She grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the back hallway. Oswald followed slowly, leaning on his cane. Emma led us down the stone steps into the wine cellar. She pointed to the west wall. Behind the big shelf, I was looking for Christmas decorations, and I leaned on it, and it moved. I approached the oak wine rack slowly, put my weight against it. It swung open on hidden hinges. Behind it was a panel, unpainted plywood recently installed, and behind that panel was a cavity in the stone wall. Inside sat an industrial nitrogen tank. It was matte gray, about 4 feet tall with warning labels. A brass valve was mounted at the top, connected to a digital timer. From the valve, clear rubber tubing snaked upward, disappearing into the ceiling. Emma tugged on my sleeve. Dad, what is it? Go upstairs, sweetheart. Take Grandpa with you, right now. But, now Emma, something in my voice made her move. She took Oswald's hand and led him up the stairs. I heard the door close above me. I stood alone in the cellar, staring at the tank. My daughter had installed this. My daughter had planned to kill her own grandfather. I followed the tubing with my flashlight. It ran along the stone, tucked into a groove. At the top, it fed into the ventilation grate. I climbed onto a wine crate and examined the vent. The metal grill had been removed, then replaced. Someone had applied clear silicone sealant around the edges, sealing it shut. I checked the other vents. Same thing. All 4 sealed tight. The room was airtight. I climbed down and crouched beside the tank, studying the timer. The display glowed faint green, showing the scheduled activation time as 9:30 p.m. on March 13th. Tomorrow night. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. The tank, the timer, the tubing, the sealed vents, every angle I could manage. Nitrogen is heavier than air. When the valve opens, it would pour out of the vents, sinking to the floor, slowly filling the room from the bottom up, displacing the oxygen. You wouldn't smell it, wouldn't taste it, wouldn't even realize you were suffocating until it was too late. In 8 to 10 minutes, the room would be a nitrogen chamber. In 5 to 10 minutes after that, you'd be dead. And the nitrogen would dissipate. Leave no trace. Just an old man who died in a cellar with bad ventilation. A tragic accident. I checked my father's desk calendar in the corner. I flipped to tomorrow's date. March 13th. There in the 9 p.m. slot, written in handwriting that wasn't my father's, wine selection with Vesper. I recognized the script. Vespers. The same handwriting I used to see on birthday cards. She'd written it herself. Scheduled her own grandfather's execution. I took a picture of the calendar entry. Then I heard voices upstairs. Vesper's car had pulled in. She was home. I moved quickly, swinging the wine rack back into place. Made sure everything looked untouched. Climbed the stairs and locked the cellar door behind me. In the living room, Emma sat on the couch beside Oswald. Her small face was tight with worry. Vesper stood in the doorway, smiling. "Hey, Dad, everything okay?" I forced myself to meet her eyes. "Fine. Just checking on some old bottles. Emma said she found something down there." "Just the old furnace," I said evenly. "Nothing to worry about." Vesper's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. Suspicion, fear. "Well, don't forget you and Grandpa are supposed to pick out wine for dinner tomorrow night." I wrote it in his calendar. I saw that. Great. She turned and headed upstairs. "I'm going to take a nap." The moment she was gone, I pulled Emma close. "Listen to me very carefully. Tomorrow night, you and Grandpa are going somewhere safe. Do you understand?" She nodded, her eyes wide. "And you don't tell Vesper, not a word." "Okay, Dad." Oswald leaned forward. "Adrian, what's going on?" I looked at my father. This man who'd built everything we had, who'd taught me about integrity and hard work and family, and I felt rage burn through me. "So Vesper's trying to hurt you, Dad." Emma found the proof. His face went pale. "What?" "I'll explain later. Right now I need to make a phone call." I went into my study and closed the door. I stared at the photos on my phone. The nitrogen tank, the timer, the sealed vents. This was it. The end game. I pulled up Harlan's contact and dialed. "Adrian." "What's wrong?" "I need Detective Morrison's number." He gave me the number without asking questions. I hung up and dialed. A woman's voice answered. Professional, clipped. "Morrison. Detective Morrison, my name is Adrian Holloway. I need your help. I have evidence of a planned crime, and I need you to witness a confession." There was a pause. "What are you proposing?" "A sting, tomorrow night. I'll provide the location. All you have to do is listen and move in when I give the signal." "This is highly irregular." "I know, but my father's life is on the line, and I'm running out of time." She exhaled slowly. "I'll need to see your evidence first. I can bring it to you tonight." "Fine, my office, 7 p.m. She hung up. I walked back into the living room. Emma was holding Oswald's hand, both of them sitting quietly, waiting. "Dad, what did you find down there?" Emma whispered. I crouched down to her level. "Something very dangerous, sweetheart. But you did exactly the right thing by telling me. You might have just saved Grandpa's life." She threw her arms around my neck. "I don't want anything to happen to him. It won't, I promise." Oswald looked at me, his eyes full of questions and grief. "Tomorrow night," I said quietly. "We end this." In 30 hours, Vesper and Malcolm would walk down to that wine cellar, believing they were about to commit the perfect crime. But I'd be ready, and my 7-year-old daughter had just become the hero who saved us all. The diner was nearly empty at 6 in the morning, just a waitress refilling coffee and a cook working the grill in back. I'd chosen the place deliberately, Halfway between Millbrook and Denver, anonymous, Detective Rachel Morrison was already waiting in a booth by the window. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe late 30s, with sharp eyes and short dark hair. She wore jeans and a fleece jacket, off-duty or trying to look that way. She stood when I approached, extending her hand. "Mr. Holloway, Detective, thank you for meeting me." I slid into the booth and set my laptop on the table. The waitress came by and I ordered black coffee I wouldn't drink. When we were alone again, I opened the laptop and turned it toward her. "My daughter is trying to take my father's life," I said quietly. "And I can prove it." For the next hour, I walked her through everything. I started with the financials. Vesper's gambling debts, Malcolm's background, the loan shark connection. $2.4 million for your daughter, Morrison said. 1.8 for Malcolm Reed. Combined debt, 4.2 million. And your father's estate is worth 12 million split between you and Vesper. 6 million each if he dies. Not enough to cover both their debts. She looked up. But if you also died, see, my will before I changed it left everything to Vesper. She'd get the full 12 million. I pulled up the next set of files, the timeline of attempts. Attempt 1, 6 weeks ago. I showed her the photos of the medication bottle. Someone switched my father's heart medication with pseudoephedrine. It triggered a cardiac episode. You have proof. Dr. Marcus Brennan tested the pills. I can provide his report and the physical evidence. He's willing to testify. Attempt 2, 5 days ago. I pulled up the photos of the boat, the loosened drain plug, the filed oarlock. Sabotage. In 45-degree water, my father would have died of hypothermia within minutes. You have a witness, Margaret Whitmore, our neighbor. She saw Vesper at the dock the night before. She's willing to testify. Attempt 3. I opened the camera footage from the kitchen. Morrison watched silently as Vesper crushed pills into the teacup. What was in the tea? Diphenhydramine, high dose. Combined with my father's heart medication, it would have caused severe drowsiness and a dangerous drop in blood pressure. I clicked to the next set of photos. The nitrogen tank filled the screen. This is in your house, in the wine cellar, hidden behind a false panel. Industrial nitrogen tank. Timer valve set for 9:30 tomorrow night. Rubber tubing fed into the ceiling vents which have been sealed shut. I walked her through the mechanism, the nitrogen displacing oxygen, the room becoming a gas chamber in 8 to 10 minutes. But no chemical trace, I said. No residue, the perfect crime. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up. And you know they're planning to trigger this tomorrow night. I have audio. I played the clip from the surveillance camera, Malcolm's voice confident and cold. The nitrogen won't show up. Poor ventilation. When it finished, Morrison sat back. This is solid, but there's a problem. What? Defense attorneys. A good one could argue you tampered with the tank yourself. It's all circumstantial. I know. You need them to confess, on record, with witnesses. I know, I said again. That's why I'm here. She studied me. What are you proposing? A sting operation. Tomorrow night. I'll provide the location. All you need to do is listen and move in when I give the signal. You want to confront them yourself. I need to. They won't confess to you. But if they think their plan is working, they might slip. Morrison shook her head. That's incredibly dangerous. I know, but I'll be wired. You'll hear everything. The moment things go south, you breach. She was quiet, thinking. Finally, she spoke. Walk me through it, step by step. I pulled up a document I'd drafted, a timeline, 5 phases. By phase 1, 6 p.m. tomorrow. My father gets evacuated. Dr. Brennan will call him for an emergency follow-up. He'll be safe in Denver. You're not telling him. He doesn't need that burden. Phase 2, 7 to 9 p.m. You and your team stage nearby. I'll wear a wire. The cameras will be recording. Phase 3, 8 p.m. I announce I'm checking the wine inventory. Vesper will offer to help. Malcolm will follow. Phase 4, 9 to 9:30. The confrontation. I'll be in the wine cellar. I'll tell them I know what they've done. You're hoping they'll confess. I'm banking on it. Malcolm's arrogant, Vesper's desperate. People like that make mistakes. Or they get violent. No, that's why you'll be listening. Phase 5, 9:30. You move in with a warrant. Arrest them both. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned forward. Mr. Holloway, you're asking me to let you walk into what could become a hostage situation. I'm the one making this choice, not you. She held my gaze. Why not just arrest them now? Because a good defense attorney would tear it apart. But if they confess, there's no defense. Morrison exhaled slowly. All right, I'll coordinate with my team. I'll need your address and a blueprint of the property. I can get you that. She stood. And Mr. Holloway. The moment I hear a threat on that wire, we're coming in. Understood. Understood. She paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. No parent should have to do this. I didn't trust myself to speak, just nodded. After she left, I sat alone staring at the laptop screen. The photo of the nitrogen tank. The timer counting down. I had one chance. One night to end this. Day 13 was coming. Dr. Brennan's office felt different at night. Quieter. The waiting room lights were off, the reception desk empty. Just the two of us in his private consultation room, the city lights of Denver glowing through the window. My father sat in the leather chair across from Brennan's desk, looking smaller than he had that morning. Frailer. I'd told him we needed a follow-up, routine blood work after the heart episode. He'd accepted it without question. But now sitting here in the dim office, he was watching me with eyes that saw too much. Hun, he said quietly. You've been acting strange for weeks. What's really going on? I'd rehearsed this moment a dozen times. But now faced with him, the words stuck in my throat. Dad, I need to ask you something. Have you noticed anything unusual about Vesper? He was quiet for a long time. Then he sighed a sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep and tired. You mean the questions about the will? My heart stopped. You knew. I'm 82, Adrian, not senile. He shifted in his chair. I've noticed a lot of things. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted to be wrong. He looked out the window. 2 months ago, Vesper came to me, asked me to change my will, leave everything to her. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What did you say? Well, I asked her why. She said you didn't need the money, that I should take care of her instead. And I told her no, the split stays 50-50, that's fair. How did she react? He was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice was softer. She got angry, not loud, but I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Something cold. What did she do? She apologized, said she was stressed about money, asked me to forget she'd mentioned it. He turned back to me. But I didn't forget Adrian, and when I started getting sick, when the pills stopped working right when the boat felt wrong that morning. I wondered. I didn't want to believe it. My own granddaughter. His voice cracked. How do you believe something like that? I reached across the space between us and took his hand. It felt thin and fragile in mine. The pills, he said. Someone switched them. Didn't they? Yes. And the boat. That wasn't an accident. No. The tea. I nodded. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. My granddaughter. We sat in silence. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. What do I do, son? He finally asked. I'd spent 2 weeks asking myself the same question. And now looking at my father, I knew the answer. You trust me." He looked up. "Dad, I'm going to handle this, but I need you to stay here tomorrow with Dr. Brennan. You'll be safe here." "What's happening tomorrow?" "There's going to be a confrontation. The police are involved. It ends tomorrow night." He stared at me. "A confrontation? Where?" "The wine cellar." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "They're planning something. They've already set it up. We just have to catch them in the act." "I should be there." "No. Adrian, she's my granddaughter, which is exactly why you can't be there." I leaned forward, squeezing his hand. "Dad, I can't risk you. If something goes wrong, if they panic, I need to know you're safe. You're walking into danger. I'll have the police right outside. I'll be wired. The moment things go bad, they'll come in." He studied my face for a long time. Then he squeezed my hand back. "I raised you to stand up for what's right, son. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." "I know, but I also raised you to protect the people you love." His voice was steady now, stronger. "So I'm trusting you. I'm staying here. I'm letting you handle this." "Thank you." But Adrian." He held my gaze. "Remember something. She's still my granddaughter. Still your daughter. Whatever she's done, whatever happens tomorrow, don't forget that." "How can I forget? I see her face every time I close my eyes." "That girl is still in there somewhere." "Is she?" My voice was harsh. "Because the woman I've been watching for 2 weeks, I don't recognize her at all." My father was quiet. Then he stood slowly and pulled me up with him. And for the first time in years, he hugged me. Not the quick, awkward embrace we'd fallen into at holidays, but a real hug, the kind he used to give me when I was a kid. "Your mother would be proud of you," he said into my shoulder. "The man you've become. The choices you're making." I felt my throat tighten. "I'm scared, Dad." "I know, son. So am I." When we finally pulled apart, he kept his hands on my shoulders. "I built this family on integrity," he said. "Your grandfather before me did the same. Money comes and goes, but character that lasts forever." Vesper forgot that. Or maybe we didn't teach her well enough. He dropped his hands. "I've asked myself that every day. Did I fail her?" "We tried, Dad." "I know. But sometimes people choose their own path." He sat back down, suddenly looking exhausted. "No matter what happens to me, Dad, don't listen." His voice was firm. "No matter what happens, you keep that legacy alive. Integrity, honesty, that's what matters." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Dr. Brennan appeared in the doorway. "I've got the guest room set up for you, Oswald." "Thank you." My father stood again. He looked at me and I saw everything in his eyes. Love, fear, trust, pride. "I'll see you after this is over," he said. "You will." He paused at the door. "And Adrian, be careful. Don't try to be a hero. Just get the confession and get out." "I will." I watched him walk down the hallway, his steps slow but steady. Tomorrow night I'd walk into that wine cellar, and by 9 o'clock, everything would be over. One way or another. My phone rang at 6 o'clock sharp. I let it ring twice before answering long enough for Vesper and Malcolm to hear it from the living room. Dr. Brennan's voice came through steady and calm, exactly as we'd rehearsed. "Mr. Holloway, your father needs to come in right away. I'm seeing some concerning irregularities in his recent test results." I tapped the speaker button and set the phone on the kitchen counter. Brennan continued, his tone measured but urgent enough to sound convincing. "I'd like to run a few more tests tonight, just to be safe." From the corner of my eye, I saw Vesper lean forward in her chair. Malcolm's hand stilled on his coffee mug. "Of course, doctor," I said. "We'll be there in an hour." I ended the call and turned to find my father standing in the doorway, already reaching for his coat. He met my eyes for half a second, and I saw something there I hadn't expected: pride. Emma appeared beside him, holding her backpack. She'd packed it quietly an hour ago, just like I'd told her. A change of clothes, her favorite stuffed rabbit, her notebook. Vesper stood smoothing her sweater. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No need," I said, keeping my voice level. "We'll be fine." Malcolm set his mug down a little too carefully. "You sure we don't mind?" "Just stay, Uncle," I said. "Enjoy the evening." Vesper's eyes flicked to Emma. "Why's Emma going?" "She wants to be with Grandpa," I said evenly. "It's just for the night." Vesper smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Call if you need anything, Dad." I nodded and helped Oswald with his coat. Emma slipped her hand into mine, quiet and watchful. We walked out together into the cold March air. As we pulled away from the estate, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Vesper stood at the living room window watching us go. Emma's small voice came from the back seat. "Dad, are we really going to the doctor?" "We're going somewhere safe, sweetheart." Oswald exhaled slowly beside me. "They think I'm going to die tonight. They think we all might," I said quietly. Oswald turned slightly. "You have the wire." I tapped my chest lightly. The microphone was taped under my shirt, small and undetectable. Morrison's listening. Porter's with her. 2 backup officers in position. And the wine cellar. Still set. Timer's live. They haven't touched it. By 6:45, we were at Brennan's office in Denver. The building was quiet, most of the staff gone for the evening. Brennan met us at the side entrance and led us to a private room in the back. "There's security on this floor," Brennan said. "No one gets in without clearance. You'll both be safe here." Emma sat beside Oswald, still clutching her rabbit. My father looked up at me, and I saw the same expression he'd worn when he taught me how to tie a proper knot, patient, steady, unshakable. "Go finish this," he said. I crouched down beside Emma. "I need you to stay here with Grandpa, okay?" "When are you coming back?" "Soon, I promise." She wrapped her small arms around my neck. "Be careful, Daddy." "I will." I stood and looked at my father. "I love you, Dad." "I know, now go." I left before the weight of it could break me. The drive back to Millbrook felt longer than it should have. At 7:30, my phone buzzed. Vesper's name lit up the screen. I answered on speaker. "Hey, Chakuo. Hey, Dad." Her voice was light, almost cheerful. "Malcolm and I were thinking of grabbing dinner in town. You want us to bring something back for you and Grandpa?" I glanced at the surveillance app on my phone mounted on the dashboard. The living room camera showed Vesper and Malcolm still seated on the couch, exactly where I'd left them. They hadn't moved. "That's sweet of you," I said, keeping my tone casual. "But we're fine. Take your time." You sure?" "Yeah, enjoy your night." "Love you, Dad." "Love you too." I ended the call and stared at the screen. Vesper leaned back into the couch, smiling at Malcolm. He said something I couldn't hear, and she laughed. They were testing me, making sure I was really gone. By 8:15, I was 10 minutes from Millbrook. Morrison's voice crackled through the earpiece I'd just slipped in. "We're in position. Unmarked sedan, quarter-mile south of the estate. You ready?" "Yeah." "Remember the signal. If you feel threatened, say, 'Help me.' We come in immediately." "Got it. Adrian." Her voice softened slightly. "You don't have to do this. We have enough for an arrest." "I need to hear it from her," I said. "I need to know why." Morrison was quiet for a moment. "Then we'll be listening. You're not alone." I pulled off the highway and onto the narrow road leading to the estate. The trees closed in around me, their branches black against the twilight sky. My headlights caught the edge of the iron gate, and I slowed as the house came into view. Every light was on. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, my hands resting on the wheel. Through the living room window, I could see Vesper and Malcolm. She was pouring wine. He was laughing. They looked so normal. My phone buzzed. A text from Oswald. "I'm praying for you, son." I typed back quickly, "I love you, Dad." Then another text appeared. From Emma. Come back soon, Daddy. We're waiting for you. I slipped the phone into my pocket and stepped out of the car. The gravel crunched under my feet, loud in the stillness. I walked up the front steps, my hand reaching for the door handle. This was it. The moment everything changed. I pushed the door open. Vesper turned at the sound, her face lighting up with a smile that once would have warmed me. Dad, she said brightly. You're back. I stepped inside and let the door close behind me. I wasn't prey anymore. I was the hunter. Before I reveal what happened in that wine cellar, I need to hear from you. Comment below and tell me if you discovered your own child planning something unthinkable. Would you confront them or walk away? Your answer shows me you're still here with this story. A quick note: upcoming scenes contain fictionalized elements for storytelling purposes. If you'd prefer to stop here, feel free to close the video now. Vesper's voice reached me before I'd even closed the door. How's Grandpa? I set my keys on the hall table and turned to face her. She stood in the archway to the living room, Malcolm just behind her, both wearing expressions of concern that might have fooled anyone else. He's fine, I said evenly. Just routine tests. They're keeping him overnight for observation. Malcolm nodded. Better safe than sorry. Exactly. I walked past them toward the kitchen, letting the silence stretch. Then I stopped and turned back. I'm going down to the wine cellar. Need to grab a bottle for tomorrow. Vesper exchanged a quick glance with Malcolm. It lasted less than a second, but I caught it. I'll come with you, she said. Malcolm straightened. Me too. I nodded slowly. Sure. Let's all go. The stone steps down to the cellar were narrow and steep. My footsteps echoed off the walls, and behind me I could hear Vesper's breathing a little faster than it should have been. I flipped the light switch at the bottom. The wine cellar stretched out before us, rows of bottles lining the walls, the air cool and slightly damp. I walked slowly toward the west wall, letting my fingers trail along the necks of the bottles as I passed. Dad! Vesper's voice was tight. What are you looking for? I stopped in front of the oak wine rack that concealed the panel. Turned to face them both. The truth. Then I pulled the rack aside. The nitrogen tank sat exactly where I'd photographed it. 100 liters of industrial-grade gas, the timer valve mounted on top, clear tubing snaking up toward the ceiling vents. Vesper went still. Malcolm's jaw tightened. I turned back to them, keeping my voice steady. Want to explain this? For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Vesper took a step forward, her hands raised slightly, palms out. Dad, I don't know what that is. Stop. The word came out harder than I'd intended. I know everything. All of it. I moved away from the wall, closer to them, blocking the stairway. The medication tampering, the boat, the tea, and this. You installed a nitrogen tank to asphyxiate my father. The timer's set for 9:30 tonight. She invited him down here to select wine. He would have been dead by 9:40. Vesper's face crumpled. Dad, please! Why? I looked at my daughter, searching for any trace of the girl I'd raised. Just tell me why. Her eyes filled with tears. You don't understand. I'm in trouble, real trouble. I know about the debt. Vincent Carver. 2.4 million. I know about Malcolm's debt too. 1.8 million. I know you've been planning this since the day you came back. Malcolm stepped forward, his expression hardening. It was my idea. She needed money. I offered a solution. Your father's estate. $12 million. An old man with a weak heart. Who would question it? I did. My voice stayed level, but my hands were shaking. I questioned everything. Vesper's tears spilled over. He's 82 years old. He's lived his whole life. Why does he get to sit on millions while I'm drowning? The words hit me like a physical blow. Because it's his, I said quietly. He earned it. Built it from nothing. And you were going to steal it by taking his life. Don't act like you're perfect, Vesper's voice broke. You cut me off when I needed help. I cut you off because you stole from me 3 times. I gave you chances. You threw them away. Malcolm's eyes narrowed. Wait. Where's Oswald really? Somewhere safe, far from here. Vesper's face went pale. You knew this whole time. 2 weeks. Every attempt. Every lie. Every moment you pretended to care. Emma, Vesper whispered. Emma found it, didn't she? And don't. My voice turned to ice. She saved his life. She's 7 years old, and she had more courage than you've shown in 33 years. Malcolm grabbed Vesper's hand. We need to leave. Now! They moved toward the stairs. I stepped into their path. You're not going anywhere. Malcolm's hand went to his jacket. Get out of the way, Adrian. I stood my ground. No. His fingers closed around something in his pocket. Help me. I said it clearly directly into the wire taped under my shirt. The cellar door burst open. Detective Morrison came down first, her weapon drawn Officer Porter right behind her. 2 more officers followed, filling the narrow space with bodies and shouted commands. Police hands up now. Malcolm froze. Vesper stumbled backward, her eyes wide. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. Vesper Holloway, Malcolm Reed, you're under arrest for attempted murder conspiracy and premeditated homicide planning. Porter moved in with handcuffs. Malcolm didn't resist, but Vesper turned to me, her face streaked with tears. Aunt, please, I'm your daughter. My own eyes burned. I know, and I'll never forget that. They led her up the stairs, still crying, still calling my name. Morrison stayed behind, watching as I sank onto a wine crate. My legs had stopped holding me. You did well, Adrian, she said quietly. We got everything on tape. I just put my daughter in prison. You saved your father's life. I looked up at her. Then why doesn't it feel like I won? Morrison crouched down to eye level. Because love doesn't stop just because someone betrays you. 3 months later, I got a letter from the Denver County Jail, postmarked June 15th. Vesper's handwriting on the envelope. I almost didn't open it. But when I did, the first line changed everything. Dad, I'm pregnant. The courtroom smelled like old wood and stale air conditioning. I sat in the second row, my father beside me in his wheelchair, his hands folded in his lap. 3 months had passed since the night in the wine cellar, but Oswald looked like he'd aged 3 years. Across the aisle, separated by 20 feet and a gulf of broken trust, Vesper sat at the defense table. Malcolm was at his own table 10 feet away, their cases severed by the prosecution. Vesper wore a navy dress, her hair pulled back, her hands clasped. She looked smaller than I remembered. She hadn't looked at me once. District Attorney Elena Hartwell stood and addressed the judge, her voice clear and firm. The People versus Vesper Holloway and Malcolm Reed. Charges include conspiracy to commit murder, 4 counts of attempted murder, fraud, forgery, and unlawful possession of hazardous materials. The words hung in the air like a sentence already passed. The investigation had uncovered more than I'd known. Malcolm Reed wasn't just a pharmaceutical salesman with a gambling problem. He was a pattern. In 2019, his then-girlfriend's father had died in what was ruled an accidental nitrogen leak. Malcolm had inherited $400,000 through the girlfriend, then left her 6 months later. The case had been closed as an industrial accident. No one had questioned it, until now. Forensic accountant Thomas Grayson testified about Vesper's debts. $2.4 million accumulated over 4 years through underground poker games. She'd borrowed from Vincent Carver's organization at 30% interest, and the text messages were chilling. We'll collect from your family if you don't pay. The deadline had been March 30th. 15 days after the wine cellar. Harlan Pierce took the stand and described finding the forged will on Vesper's laptop. The document had been drafted 2 weeks before the first attempt on my father's life. It left 90% of Oswald's estate to Vesper, $10.8 million, and listed Malcolm as a witness. The signature was forged. The plan had been clear. Kill Oswald, present the fake will, collect the inheritance, pay off the debts, and disappear. But they hadn't counted on me noticing the pills. Dr. Brennan sat in the witness box, his voice clinical. The medication tampering was deliberate. Pseudoephedrine combined with Mr. Holloway's existing heart condition could have caused a fatal cardiac event, and Maggie Whitmore testified next. I saw Vesper at the dock around 10 o'clock at night working on something near the boat. Detective Morrison played the audio from the wine cellar confrontation. The courtroom fell silent as Vesper's voice filled the space. He's 82 years old. He's lived his whole life, and Malcolm's response, cold and calculating. Easy money. Who would question it? I watched the jury. Several of them looked at Vesper with something close to disgust. When they called me to the stand, my legs felt unsteady. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Hartwell approached slowly. Mr. Holloway, please describe your relationship with your daughter. I looked at Vesper. She was staring at the table. I loved her, I said quietly. I still do. And yet you're here today testifying against her. Because she chose money over family, over her grandfather's life. The defense attorney, Linda Cho, stood for cross-examination. Mr. Holloway, isn't it true that you cut off financial support to Vesper 3 years ago? Yes. Why? Because she stole $50,000 from my accounts. 3 separate times. I gave her chances. She needed to face consequences. So you abandoned her when she needed help most. I felt anger flash through me. I didn't abandon her. I stopped enabling her. There's a difference. My father took the stand in his wheelchair, and the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. My granddaughter asked me to change my will. When I refused, she tried to end my life. He paused. I never thought I'd live to see this day. The second week belonged to the defense. Malcolm's attorney argued that Vesper had manipulated him. The prosecution tore that apart, asking why a mercy killing would require a nitrogen trap and a forged will. Malcolm had no answer. Vesper's defense centered on mental health. A psychiatrist testified about gambling addiction and impulse control disorder, arguing that Vesper needed treatment, not prison. Then Vesper took the stand. I'm sorry, I was desperate. I made terrible choices. She looked at me for the first time in 3 months. But I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted the pain to stop. Hartwell rose for cross-examination, her tone ice. You put medication in your grandfather's tea. You sabotaged his boat. You installed a nitrogen trap in his wine cellar. Which part of that was not wanting to hurt anyone? Vesper's face crumpled. I don't know. I don't know. On June 28th, the jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood and read the verdict. Malcolm Reed guilty on all counts. 25 years eligible for parole after 20. Vesper Holloway guilty on all counts. Mitigating factors of mental health issues, no prior violent offenses, demonstrated remorse. 18 years eligible for parole after 12. Vesper collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Malcolm's face remained blank. I felt my father's hand close around mine, and I realized I was crying too. The judge's gavel came down. Justice had been served. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral. As they led Vesper out in handcuffs, she turned back and looked at me. Her lips moved, forming 2 words I could read even from across the room. I'm sorry. I nodded once, because I was sorry too. But forgiveness didn't erase consequences, and some choices couldn't be undone. Outside the courthouse, the summer sun was too bright. Oswald sat quietly in his wheelchair, staring at nothing. You did the right thing, son, he said finally. Then why does it hurt so much? Because you loved her, and you still do. 3 days later, I received another letter from Vesper. She was 4 months pregnant. The baby was due in December, and she was asking me to take custody when the child was born. I sat with that letter for a long time, staring at the words until they blurred. Then I called my lawyer. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the sentencing. I recognized Vesper's handwriting immediately, still neat, still careful the way I'd taught her when she was 6. 3 pages handwritten in blue ink. The first line stopped me cold. Dad, I need to tell you something. Please come visit. I hadn't been to see her since the trial. Hadn't wanted to. Every time I thought about making the drive, I remembered the wine cellar, the nitrogen tank, the timer set for 9:30, the premeditation of it all. But I also remembered the girl who used to fish with me on Lake Thornton, the one who promised she'd make me proud. Oswald found me at the kitchen table, staring at the pages. "How are you going?" he asked quietly. "I don't know." He lowered himself into the chair across from me, moving slowly, carefully. The trial had aged him in ways I hadn't fully recognized until now. "Go," he said. "You'll regret it if you don't." Sterling was a 2-hour drive northeast, the landscape shifting from mountains to plains as I left Denver behind. The Colorado Women's Correctional Facility sat on the edge of town, low concrete buildings, surrounded by chain-link fencing and guard towers. I checked in at the front desk, passed through security, and waited in a sterile visiting room with plexiglass dividers and phones mounted on the walls. The chairs were bolted to the floor. Everything was designed to prevent connection. The door on the other side of the glass opened, and Vesper walked in. She looked smaller, thinner. Her hair had been cut short, and the prison uniform hung loose on her frame. But it was her eyes that stopped me, hollow, exhausted. But something else, too. Something I hadn't seen in years. Fear. She sat down and picked up the phone. I picked up mine. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Thank you for coming," she said finally. "What did you need to tell me?" She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." The words didn't register at first. I heard them, but they felt disconnected from reality, like she'd spoken in another language. "What?" 8 weeks. I found out 2 weeks ago. My hand tightened on the phone. "Malcolm?" "Yes." "Does he know?" "I told him yesterday through my lawyer. He said he wants nothing to do with it." Of course he didn't. Malcolm Reed had already moved on to his next survival strategy: distance himself. Minimize culpability, serve his time quietly. A baby. My granddaughter. Conceived by 2 people who'd tried to murder my father. "I know what you're thinking," Vesper said, her voice cracking slightly. "That I don't deserve to be a mother." "I didn't say that. You don't have to. I can see it in your eyes." She wiped at her face with the back of her hand. The cuffs on her wrist were too big, sliding up her forearm. "The baby's due in February. I'll give birth here in the medical unit. Colorado law says I can keep her with me for 18 months. After that..." Her voice broke. "After that, she goes into the system, foster care, unless a family member takes custody." The air in the room felt too thin. "Dad, please." Her hand pressed against the glass. "Please take her." I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, loved, lost, and felt something crack open inside me. "You're asking me to raise your daughter while you sit in prison for trying to kill my father. I'm asking you to give her a chance I never gave Grandpa." She leaned closer to the glass, her breath fogging it slightly. "She's innocent. She didn't choose this. And I know I have no right to ask. But she's your granddaughter." Part of me wanted to say no, wanted to walk out and never look back. But I looked at Vesper, broken, desperate, but for the first time not thinking about herself. And I thought about what my father would do. "I need time to think. I understand. If, and I'm emphasizing if I agree, there will be conditions. Anything. You sign over full legal guardianship, no interference. Yes. You get help. Real help. Therapy, addiction, counseling, everything. I've already enrolled. The prison has a program. And when you're released, if you're released, you don't automatically get her back. You have to prove you're stable, sober, safe." Vesper nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I will. I promise. I've heard your promises before." "I know." Her voice was barely a whisper. "But this time I mean it. She deserves better than what I gave you and Grandpa." I sat back in the chair, the phone still pressed to my ear. On the other side of the glass, Vesper waited, her whole body tense with hope I wasn't sure I could give her. "I'll talk to Dad," I said finally. Relief washed over her face. "Thank you. I'm not doing this for you," I said quietly. "I'm doing it for her." She nodded. "I know. That night I told Oswald everything." He listened without interrupting, his hands folded on the kitchen table, his expression unreadable. When I finished, silence filled the room, broken only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. "What will her name be?" he asked finally. "We don't know yet. I'd like to suggest one." He looked at me, his eyes steady. "Margaret, after your mother." I hadn't expected that. "Mom?" So she always believed in second chances, even when people didn't deserve them. He reached across the table and gripped my hand. "This baby. She's our second chance. To break this cycle. To raise someone with integrity." His voice was firm, but I could see the exhaustion in his face, the way the weight of everything had pressed him down. "Do it, son. Give this girl the family Vesper didn't appreciate." I thought about my mother, strong, patient, forgiving, in ways I'd never fully understood. She would have said yes immediately, would have seen the baby as a blessing, not a burden. "Okay," I said. "We'll do it." Oswald squeezed my hand. "Good man." The next day I called my lawyer. Within a week the paperwork was filed. Vesper signed the guardianship documents without hesitation, her signature shaky but clear. In 8 months a baby would be born. A child tied to so much pain. But maybe, just maybe, she could be our redemption too. February came, and with it everything changed again. The phone rang at 3 in the morning. I fumbled for it in the dark, my heart already racing before I saw the number. Sterling area code. "Mr. Holloway, your daughter is in labor." I was out of bed before the nurse finished speaking. Emma was already awake when I knocked on her door, sitting on the edge of her bed in her pajamas, as if she'd been waiting. "Is it time, Dad?" "Yes, sweetheart. Get dressed. You're coming with me." Oswald was awake too, sitting on the edge of his bed in his robe. He looked frail in the dim light, but his voice was steady. "Let's go meet your great-granddaughter, Emma." We drove through the pre-dawn darkness, snow falling in soft, steady flakes. The roads were empty, the world holding its breath. Emma sat in the back seat, quiet and watchful. "Dad, is Vesper scared?" "Probably. Even after everything she did, she's still having a baby honey. That's scary no matter what." We reached Sterling just after 5:30. The Correctional Medical Unit was a low utilitarian building attached to the main prison, accessed through a separate entrance with reinforced doors and security cameras. A guard checked our IDs and led us down a narrow hallway that smelled of antiseptic. Outside one of the rooms, another officer stood watch. Inside, Vesper lay in a hospital bed, her face pale and slick with sweat. An IV line ran into her arm. When she saw me, her expression crumpled with relief. "Dad, you came. I said I would." Emma hung back near the door, uncertain. Vesper looked at her sister, and something flickered across her face. Shame, maybe, or regret. "Hi, Emma." Emma didn't respond, just gripped my hand tighter. I moved to Vesper's side and took her hand. It was cold, trembling slightly. A nurse checked the monitors. "She's at 7 centimeters. Could be a few more hours." Oswald waited outside. He was too frail to stand for long, but the guard allowed me to stay. Emma stayed too, sitting in a chair by the window, watching everything with those quiet, observant eyes. Vesper gripped my hand through each contraction, her breathing ragged, her fear palpable. "Dad, I'm so scared." Said, "I know, but you're strong. You can do this." And what if I'm a terrible mother? I looked at her, this woman who'd made so many wrong choices, and I saw the girl she'd been. The one who'd believed in second chances. "You're giving her a better life than you had. That's love." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. The hours passed slowly. Vesper's labor intensified. and the nurse coached her through each contraction with calm efficiency. Emma watched from her chair, her small hands folded in her lap, her face serious. At one point, she stood and walked to the bedside. Vesper, her voice was soft but clear. My daughter looked at her sister, surprised. You can do this, Emma said. I know you can. Vesper's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, Emma. It was the first kind thing Emma had said to her sister in months. And in that moment, I saw a flicker of the family we might have been. At 11:47, Margaret Grace Holloway came into the world. 6 pounds, 11 ounces. Healthy. Strong. Her cry filled the small room, loud and insistent, and I felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't expected. Hope. The nurse placed her on Vesper's chest, and my daughter sobbed, cradling the baby with a tenderness I hadn't seen in years. She looks like Mom, Vesper whispered. I leaned in closer, looking at the tiny wrinkled face, the shock of dark hair. She does. Emma stood up slowly, moving closer to the bed. Can I see her? Vesper looked at her sister, then nodded. Emma peered at the baby, her expression serious. She's really small. You were this small once, I said. For a moment, the walls of the prison fell away. There was only Vesper and her daughter Emma and me, a small, fragile moment of grace in a place designed to strip it away. They allowed us 18 hours of visitation. Vesper fed Maggie, held her, whispered to her in soft, broken tones. Oswald came in slowly with his cane, and when he held his great-granddaughter for the first time, his hands shook. Hello, little Margaret Grace, he said quietly. I'm your great-grandpa, and you're going to have a good life. I promise you that. Emma stood beside him, watching Maggie with protective eyes. Can I hold her too, Grandpa? Oswald smiled. Of course, sweetheart. He carefully transferred Maggie into Emma's arms, and Emma sat down, slowly cradling her niece with surprising gentleness. She looked down at the baby's face, her expression softening. Hi, Maggie. I'm your Aunt Emma. I'm going to help take care of you. Vesper watched from the bed, tears streaming down her face. You're going to be an amazing big sister, Emma. Emma didn't look up. I know. At 2 p.m, a social worker arrived with the guardianship papers. Vesper signed them without hesitation, her hand steady despite the tears. The birth certificate listed Adrian Holloway and Oswald Holloway as legal guardians. When it was time to leave, Vesper held Maggie one last time. She kissed her forehead, her lips trembling. I'm sorry I can't be the mother you deserve, she whispered to the baby. But your grandpa, he's the best man I've ever known. He'll teach you everything I forgot. Then she looked at Emma. Emma, will you tell her about me someday? The good parts, if there are any. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. I'll tell her you loved her. Vesper's face crumpled. Then she handed Maggie to me. The weight of her, so small, so warm, settled into my arms, and I felt the enormity of what we were doing. It's Dad. Vesper looked at me. Thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I gave up on myself, I'm your father, I said quietly. I'll never give up on you. But you have 17 years left to figure out who you want to be. I will. I'll use every day. Vesper reached out and touched Maggie's hand one last time. Goodbye, sweetheart. Mommy loves you. The drive home was quiet. Maggie slept in her car seat, bundled in a soft pink blanket the hospital had given us. Emma sat beside her in the back seat, one hand resting gently on the car seat, as if standing guard. Oswald rode up front, his gaze distant, lost in thought. I glanced at him. You okay? He nodded slowly. I was just thinking about your mother. She would have loved this moment. A new beginning. And she would have been a wonderful great-grandmother. She would have spoiled Maggie rotten, he said with a soft smile. Just like she spoiled Vesper. Emma spoke up from the back seat. Grandpa, do you think Maggie will remember her mom? Oswald turned to look at her. She won't remember her face, honey, but we'll make sure she knows her mother loved her. That's what matters. And we'll make sure she knows she's loved, I added. Every single day. Emma nodded, satisfied. Good. We arrived at Holloway Estate just after 5. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the driveway. I carried Maggie inside and Oswald followed slowly, leaning heavily on his cane. Emma carried the diaper bag, serious and responsible. Lily had prepared the nursery in the room that had once been Vesper's. A crib stood by the window, a mobile of stars hanging above it. The walls were painted a soft cream, and a rocking chair sat in the corner waiting. Oswald held Maggie and looked around the room. This house has seen too much pain. But now there's hope. Emma stood beside him, looking at her niece with protective eyes. I'll make sure she's safe, Grandpa. I promise. I know you will, sweetheart. I stood with my father, my daughter, and my granddaughter, 3 generations, connected by blood and something stronger. Something forged in crisis and sealed in love. Maybe this is why we survived, I said. To raise her. Oswald nodded. Maybe it is. Margaret Grace Holloway entered the world on Valentine's Day, a symbol of love born from betrayal. A child who would never know the darkness that preceded her arrival, but who would be shaped by the light we chose to build in its place. And maybe, just maybe, she was our redemption. The morning sunlight danced across Lake Thornton, turning the water into a field of diamonds. I pushed Maggie's stroller along the path, the wheels crunching softly on the gravel. Beside me, my father walked slowly, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. Emma skipped ahead, pointing out birds and flowers to her niece. At 82, Oswald's every step was deliberate, but he smiled as he looked at his great-granddaughter. Maggie was 3 months old now, her eyes bright and curious, her tiny fists waving at the world. She made small, cooing sounds and Oswald laughed. She has your mother's eyes, he said quietly. I see it too, Dad. Emma ran back to us, breathless. Dad, can we take Maggie to see the ducks later? Maybe this afternoon, sweetheart. A year ago, I'd been fighting to save my father's life. Today, I was raising his great-granddaughter with help from an 8-year-old who'd already proven herself a hero. Life was strange that way. Maggie woke at 6 every morning without fail, and I'd stumble out of bed to feed her, change her, rock her back to contentment. Oswald would shuffle into the kitchen by 7, already dressed, ready to hold her while I made coffee. Emma had become my unexpected ally. She'd fetch diapers, warm bottles, sing to Maggie when she cried. She'd grown up faster than any child should have to, but she carried it with quiet grace. Lily prepared breakfast and kept the house running with quiet efficiency. She'd become more than help, she was family. Dr. Brennan visited once a month to check on Maggie. She's thriving. You're doing great. But it wasn't easy. The sleepless nights left me exhausted. Oswald's health was declining, his mobility limited, his strength fading, but he refused to miss a moment with Maggie. The financial strain was real. I'd sold off part of the estate holdings to establish a trust for her future. The grief over Vesper was always there, a low ache I'd learned to carry. But Millbrook, this small town that had watched our family unravel, rallied around us. The local church brought meals. People stopped me at the grocery store to tell me they were praying for us. Vesper wrote every month. The first letter arrived in April, 2 months after Maggie's birth. She described the prison therapy program, addiction counseling, trauma recovery. She'd completed her GED. She was taking accounting classes and parenting courses. In May, another letter came. Thank you for the photos. Maggie is beautiful. I think about her every day. I've been clean, sober for 8 months. Tell Grandpa I'm sorry. Every single day I'm sorry. Tell Emma thank you. For saving him. For being brave when I wasn't. I sent photos every month. Maggie sleeping, smiling, reaching for toys. Short updates about milestones. Brief replies. I couldn't promise reconciliation, but I wouldn't close the door either. She was still my daughter. One evening in late May, I sat on the porch with Oswald while Maggie slept in my arms. Emma sat on the steps coloring. The sun was setting over Lake Thornton, painting the sky in gold and pink. "I've been thinking," Oswald said, "about forgiveness and legacy. Vesper made terrible choices, but she's trying now." "I know, Dad." Emma looked up. "What will you tell Maggie about her mother, Dad?" I thought for a moment. "The truth. All of it. The good and the bad." Oswald nodded. "Tell her that people can fall, but they can also get back up. That's the legacy I want to leave. Not perfection. Perseverance." He reached over and took my hand. "Teach Maggie what I taught you. And Emma already knows." "I will, I promise." Maggie's first birthday fell on February 14th, 2026. We held a small party at the estate. Maggie wore a little pink dress and took her first wobbly steps across the living room floor, everyone cheering as she stumbled into my arms. Emma was 9 now, patient and protective with her niece. She helped Maggie blow out the candle, steadied her steps, wiped frosting from her cheeks. Oswald sat in a chair, weaker now, but present. He watched them with pride so fierce it made my chest ache. The prison allowed Vesper a supervised video call. She appeared on the screen, thinner, older, but her eyes were clear. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she whispered to Maggie. "Mommy loves you." Oswald passed away peacefully in his sleep on December 3rd, 2026. He was 83 years old. The night before, he'd held Maggie one last time, whispering to her about integrity and family. When I found him the next morning, he looked at peace. On a warm evening in May 2026, Emma and I took Maggie to the lake. Emma was 9, Maggie was 1. Emma held her niece's hand as they walked along the dock. When I'm bigger, I'll teach you to row," Emma said to Maggie. "Just like great-grandpa taught Dad." I watched them 2 generations learning what it meant to be a Holloway. Emma turned back to me. "Dad, do you think Vesper will ever come home? Maybe someday, when she's ready. Will Maggie remember her? Spiatonino. We'll make sure she knows her mother tried to change. That people can make mistakes and still deserve love." Maggie pointed at the lake. "Water, water," Emma laughed. "That's right, Maggie." I crouched down beside them. "One day I'll teach you both to row, just like your great-grandpa taught me. And one day you'll teach your children." That's how legacies work. I held them both close, these 2 girls who'd become my world. We didn't just survive. We became a family, a real one. Built not on money or blood, but on love, sacrifice, and second chances. And that legacy, it was worth everything. Oswald Holloway passed away peacefully on December 3rd, 2026, at age 83. Vesper Holloway is currently serving her sentence at Colorado Women's Correctional Facility, remaining sober, eligible for parole 2037. Malcolm Reed is serving 25 years. Margaret Grace Holloway turned 1 in February 2026, thriving in Adrian's care. Emma Holloway, now 9, continues helping raise Maggie. Holloway Estate was sold in 2026 for $1.8 million, placed in trust for Maggie's future. Adrian continues raising Maggie and Emma in Millbrook, visiting Vesper twice a year. Some stories don't have happy endings, but they have hopeful ones. This is one of them. 60 years on this earth taught me many things, but nothing prepared me for the lesson family betrayal would teach me about love and survival. My advice: don't ignore the warning signs like I almost did. Don't let love blind you to patterns of manipulation. Grandpa stories like ours aren't just tales, they're lessons passed down so you can protect the people you care about. I've learned that family betrayal happens when desperation meets opportunity. Vesper wasn't born wanting to harm us, but addiction, debt, and bad influences turned her into someone I barely recognized. If you see a loved one spiraling, intervene early. Don't wait until it's too late. Through this journey, I've turned to God 3 times more than I ever did before. When I felt alone in that wine cellar, God gave me strength. When I held Maggie for the first time, I felt God's grace. And when my father passed peacefully, I thanked God for the time we had. Grandpa stories teach us that integrity isn't about being perfect. It's about standing up when it matters most. My father showed me that family betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. It can refine you if you let it. My personal belief: forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing hope over bitterness. If this story moved you, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you faced family betrayal? How did you heal? Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss Grandpa stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us what really matters. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for walking this difficult journey with me to the very end. Your presence here gives these words meaning. Please note, future stories may include fictionalized scenarios designed for educational reflection. If you'd prefer different content, we encourage you to explore other options available on the platform. May peace find you wherever you are.